1, Episode 25 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. I believe it was Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick.
Hello and welcome to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host and innocent bystander standing too close to a cliff's edge, Adam.
I'm your AoE collateral death, Tom.
And I'm your local merchant with an expensive and expansive inventory and no personal guards, Steve.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show, both of you. We've all had that one experience at the table, whether it's accidental or intentional, or maybe a lack of experience or lack of forethought. Somebody always murders someone they shouldn't have. Maybe it's an important NPC or an innocent bystander, or maybe someone that could have been really useful to the party. And we're not talking about murder hobos here. Let's make that clear. We're talking about good, decent players who, one way or another, murder someone who didn't deserve it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today: murder and what to do about it. Now
in role-playing games, not in real life.
Yes, in role-playing. Our lawyers have told us that we need to focus on the role-playing aspect. Now, Tom, what is a good example of a murder that you've dealt with in one of your games, either as a player or a DM?
So that's two quick ones. First one with your intro title. I actually had a player die because they were standing too close to a cliff's edge, and another player casts a Thunderwave AoE spell and just yeeted him off the cliff. And he was I think he was actually unconscious at that point in time. So he basically just auto died because he fell, 300 feet into a forest. There's no way they were going to get him in time. So yeah, like there was that was one, but the in terms of murder, I just had a fairly recent one where I was playing Dragon of Icespire Keep. I was running it as a DM, and they were in Nomengard with the wild magic table, and I decided to follow a more extensive wild magic table that actually made more sense than just you hear a buzzing noise for 10 minutes. Even though I had them roll every time, and it was clear to many of the players that there was something happening every time they cast a leveled spell, the cleric decided to cast a spell. I think it was a guiding bolt, and rolled on the wild magic table, and it created a beat of force effect where it created a shockwave of force. And one of the gnomes NPCs was standing near him, and there was no point in even rolling dice because the minimum dice damage was higher than their HP because they're an NPC, and immediately killed them. And it kind of soured the interaction with the gnomes after that when one of their own is getting killed. So they really didn't have a positive interaction with the party. Granted, the party really immediately did damage control and were like, okay, you cleric, you need to leave right now. Like, step outside, go somewhere else. We will talk with them and try to figure it out. And they did kind of fix it a bit, like in a way that they like the fighter and the barbarian decided to converse and figure things out, and they were able to at least get something where they were not utterly hostile. Granted, they're all NPC gnomes with 7 hit points. They're not going to take on these adventurers, but I probably would have had to come with some sort of like thing. There is something called the Nomengard grenade, which would have been devastating if that was thrown around. But yeah, it worked out in the end, but it was kind of unexpected and surprising. Just, this happened. Yeah.
Well, how about you, Steve? Anything you've run into in one of your games, either player or DM?
Let me think back. So there was this one game where I had introduced, there's this powerful NPC being introduced that was sort of hanging in the wings and sort of all of a sudden became somewhat central to the story, introduced to some of the players. And so meantime, I had this other set of players who were being introduced to a plot to kill a prominent noble who was related to this new NPC I just released, figuring, okay, so we've got these two sets of the characters. They're both introduced to this family from opposite sides, and because they both have information and reason to work together, they're going to kind of come together, solve and foil the plot, and ingratiate themselves as this new powerful ally. And instead, a couple of the players went and just assassinated the Duke of Baldur's Gate. No big deal.
Oh, it was so much fun, though.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just you want to talk about a murder that turned everything sideways. I'm going to give that as Exhibit A, Your Honor.
I'll allow it. It was a great one. That definitely threw things into chaos. The one example I have, and the kind of why this was forefront in my mind here, was last night in our session, Sarah's character had the unfortunate occurrence of murdering a townsperson because you guys couldn't tell between kind of doppelgangers and these townspeople. And the thing that I loved about it, and I'm sorry, Sarah, but the look on your face whenever you realized that was someone innocent that you just murdered was amazing. I
because Sarah gets so into the character. I mean, think about for a second, if that was Rushka, that would not, if she was playing Rushka in my game, that would not have phased her at all.
One bit. Yeah.
It would have been, accidents happen. You were in the line of fire. You shouldn't have been in the situation. But she's so good at getting into character. You could see like the real Sarah's face was like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Like, it was just great. Perfect moment. And damn you for doing that to Orly. Orly's a sweetheart.
I'm sorry. Orly's such a great character, and I felt so bad because, and especially she tried to apologize and make amends, and a horrible roll from me on an insight meant that person did not believe Orly, and basically, I don't know, shunned, shamed, just said that they didn't believe her. And that was almost like a second heartbreak for her right there, that she wasn't believed.
I can't decide if I'm mad at you for choosing to roll a dice in that instance or proud of you. I haven't decided yet, but it was certainly ended up being effective in any event.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what we want to get into is not just, when those murders happen, but what you do after that's so important. So we're going to get into our questions for the week. This first post comes from Reddit user Helix1322, who asks, players kill an outpost captain. I'm trying to figure out how to deal with it. My players came to town after slaying a young red dragon. The outpost throws a celebration, drinks are had, food is cooked, and everyone is having a grand time. The party begins to slow down, and my PCs break off to do their own things. One goes and mourns a comrade they lost in the first fight with the dragon. One tends to horses. One passes out drunk, but it's the last two that lure off the captain and kill him without anyone noticing. I plan for the guards to find the body in the morning with a crossbow bolt in his head and having fallen off the wall. I'm not sure if I want them to be investigated, be hired to solve the murder, or be given the "we don't like you but can't prove anything, so get out." I'm also open to other ideas. I'm just not sure which route to take. So, dead outpost captain, what to do here, Steve? As a DM, what route would you take in dealing with this situation?
So there's a lot of things that are going to go into this. I mean, the dynamics of the group, the campaign, are the other two PCs that weren't involved in this pernicious event, are they going to be happy, sad, indifferent, outraged? Let's assume for a second that the other two PCs are not murder hobos, and so they're going to be upset about it. It might be a great moment to bring in a little bit of not conflict, but inter-party friction. So I'm sort of glomming onto this idea of having them be the ones hired to investigate it. It seems too ripe to just throw this plot point aside and let it go. I'm hoping there's a bigger reason why the two PCs decided to do what they did to this outpost captain. So it might be a great way to have the players brought in to start investigating the two PCs who weren't involved, maybe start putting some pieces together. They've got the other two PCs kind of scrambling to cover their tracks, creates for some interesting tension. And then, you try to, hopefully you get to that moment where either in this sort of setting, in this adventure, because the rolls are going the right way, they discover now what's going on, or, it comes out sometime down the line in the campaign where you get this moment of, what happens now when they find out that, oh my gosh, you were the ones who did this the whole time. And either we found out because we were investigating it, or you tricked us and hid your tracks and lied to us when we were investigating that 6 months ago. How could you betray us like that? And create some juicy tension from there. And you can kind of weave that into the story. Maybe some players now have some leverage over others, or they have to make some, moral compromises to see how they're going to continue to move forward as a team. I think there's just a lot of really interesting things you can do with this.
Yeah, and especially with murder, it shouldn't be a light thing. I know within our game we fight monsters and we kill people and all that stuff, but whenever it's an actual murder like this, I think it's really important to drive home the fact that this isn't a matter of indifference, that this is an important thing. There is consequence for this type of action. So I really would advise against the whole, well, we can't prove anything, so just leave kind of stuff. Like there should be a crisis for that community, and there's a lot of stuff to use there to drive that home. Tom, what do you think in this situation? What would you do?
Well, I agree with Steve that this should be something that leads to more. Having them be hired on makes sense, and it also makes sense with the first couple sentences of the question. Mentions that the outpost is already throwing them a party because they killed the dragon. So in the outpost mind, like, they are heroes who defeated the dragon and helped the outpost. So if anything, it would make sense for them to be hired on. It's like no one knows, unless they have witnesses that, would lead to some other issues. No one seems to know that they killed the guard captain. So how could they suddenly not like them and they were considered heroes, the night before?
Mm-hmm.
So it would make sense that, someone finds the guard captain the next day and it's like, oh no, there was a murder. Great heroes who just helped us. Could you help us again? Like, that makes logical sense to me.
Heroes
Absolutely.
be heroes. And what I really want to know is, why did they murder the guard captain?
I know.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, what are they going to need to do? Could they involve their allies who weren't involved? You have to help us cover this up because there was a good reason why we did it. Is there something that these other two characters are going to care about being achieved by murdering this guard captain to bring them in? I know we're not here to talk about how do I do a great Reddit post on asking for D&D advice, but like, wow, Helix 1322, you need to give us that detail. That's huge. Otherwise, it's just, they murdered someone. What do I do? I mean, I need to know the stakes. I need to know why. What drove them to this awful act? Can they be redeemed? Are they just black-hearted villains? Are you running an evil campaign? Give us a little more juicy detail. But I think you've got like this awesome thing to work with. You got to do something cool with it. Just sort of, we don't like you. We can't prove anything. So get on out of here.
Get on out of here.
It doesn't really seem like it's a satisfying use of this wonderful nugget of plot that your players have just violently and bloodily dropped into your lap.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like they're murder hobos, because, I mean, just the fact that one of them goes to mourn a comrade as an RP aspect, I mean, that's telling me a lot that this is not your murder hobo kind of party. So there has to be a reason why this happened, and I would love to know it. But one thing that you said earlier, Steve, that really stuck with me, that the leverage of things. And as anyone knows, whenever you tell a big lie, what ends up happening down the road is you have to tell more lies to cover those lies, and that builds an immense amount of tension in things. So in terms of, I love the idea of someone saw this, someone did, and now they're trying to blackmail, or they're trying to get something from the party. So now they're in this dilemma of, well, do they pay this person off or give them what they want or do what they want, or do they have to face the consequences? Do they murder again to cover up the previous murder, which then adds more consequences down the road? I agree with Steve. You can't let this go. There is so much that you can do with this scenario, and really make them really twist the knife, no pun intended, in terms of how you're making these players feel about what their characters have done. So, Helix, hopefully that gives you some ideas. Would love to find out more about this whole situation. I want to know what that captain did to deserve to be murdered in the dark. And, maybe we can come up with some more ideas, but hopefully that helps for now.
News here.
Oh, and the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It is time for Potomac RPG News. All right, got a couple things to talk about this week. First up, we got to talk about the early access release of Baldur's Gate 3. Now, I've been hesitant to jump on the early access train, and this article really didn't help. This is from Ars Technica by Jim Salter. It's titled, "I played 15 hours of Baldur's Gate 3 early access, and I want them back." This is a bit worrisome, to be honest. Salter talks about lack of group camaraderie and cohesion and contrasts it against a normal D&D 5e table. Tom, it got me thinking, do you think it's fair to put a video game up against a tabletop game experience and expect it to deliver?
Yes and no, I would say. Yes, you can if you're going to seek this endeavor and go and make a game that's trying to embody a tabletop RPG like D&D, you have to try and do and that you're going uphill on this, and I think you have to really put a good effort into it. But I understand that there are expectations that can't be met. It can't be exactly like a tabletop RPG with the freedom of people creating and sharing ideas. There are limits within the medium. But I think you really have to come in expecting that you have a tall order here.
Yeah, I agree.
Why not try?
And they've said already, like that. I mean, we've seen already how they're trying to implement as much D&D 5e into this game as possible. What worries me is I have a view of video RPGs that's much different than the tabletop experience. I don't expect there to be that level of immersion that you find in a video game, just because your choices are limited. So you're never going to be able to replicate that. And I've seen other articles praising BG3 and what they love about it and stuff like that. So it does seem to be a mixed bag, but that's part of what worries me, is that by doing this early access, are you almost poisoning the well? Steve, I know you've played previous Baldur's Gate. So what do you think about this early access?
So I've only played about 20 minutes of it. I was running it on my laptop, and my laptop doesn't run it all that well, so it might be a bit before I can really dive in. But it's technically it's a gorgeous game. It's got you can see a real fidelity to the concept of bringing D&D to the computer game. I mean, when I was building, I think a warlock, and all the spells that I was typically expecting to be there were listed. If you're looking after sort of like the basic rules in a player's handbook version, rather than expansive source books of material, it was fun. I mean, it was a typical point and click RPG. If you've played RPGs like these before, whether it's the Baldur's Gate games or Larian Studios who's making the game, their Divinity games, even Obsidian with like Pillars of Eternity and Tyranny, or I think it's called, and the like. I mean, this should feel pretty familiar. And I think a lot of the article, I skimmed the article, focused on certain portions, but it almost seemed to me like the author either doesn't have a lot of experience with those games, or does and doesn't really like them, because complaining about things like I've got to click and I'm using movement to do this or movement to do that, and at the end of they're talking about, well, my wizard's squishy and he's not a tank, but if he tries to push someone, he's weak at strength, so it doesn't really do him any good. But if my fighter pushes someone because they are a tank, they'll succeed, but then they're not in range to do a combat attack the next turn. It's like, well, that's the kind of tactics in these games are. Like, you got your fighter, they're a tank, they push the combatant back, and now the combatant has to spend their time closing back in on you, and they're going to have to go past you to get to the squishy mage. That sounds exactly like how that should play out. Whereas in this article, it comes across like this is somehow like a complete mismatch of how the game should work. Like I guess the scrawny wizard is supposed to have a spell that's specifically designed just so that they can push someone far away and completely obviate the need for, other members of the party or something. Like, I don't really get that. So I didn't really buy the criticism so much. It just feels like, people who are expecting D&D when they come to this, and I think that's the sort of one of the core, maybe not the only core audience, but one of the core audiences. There are a few things that are a bit different. Like there's, the need to click on a button to like do some like jumping and that. And it does take a second to wrap your head around the different types of actions you can take and sort of the way action economy is sort of communicated via the game's like user interface and that. But those are things that can likely be polished, but like the stuff's there, and that's pretty cool.
Well, and the author focuses a lot too on this group cohesion, and they talk about how, like, right off the bat, there's very antagonistic relationships with the main character, like with the different NPCs that you kind of join up with. And I can understand that maybe right out the gate, like, there's a lot of animosity between the group members, and he talked about how, well, even in the BG1 and BG2, they were different. There were evil characters and good characters, but they all seemed to be bound together by this, a shared goal of some kind. I don't think you can judge that in 15 hours as to whether that animosity off the top is such a bad thing. And I think it's a little quick to judge a game that's going to be a massive game just within the first 15 hours and say, well, the group dynamics don't work. I'm just not quite buying that. Hopefully this is just a case of sour grapes or something. I'm really hoping BG3 turns out to be wonderful in the end. If you're interested in getting it on early access, it's available now on Steam. Go check it out. But next up, we have some political news. Yay, just what we needed in our D&D, U.S. politics, right? But this is actually a bit of a fun story. This comes from GameRant.com and written by Zoe Trepanier. Most of you probably know Andrew Yang from the Democratic primaries. He certainly added some interesting elements to the conversation. Seems to be a likable guy, but it looks like he's going to be playing D&D in a D&D for Dems event October 12th, tonight, if you're listening to this episode upon release, at 7 p.m. Central Time. Now, we deal with a lot of politics every day, Steve. What do you think of politicians getting into the D&D world?
So, I mean, I just think it's kind of incredible that we're even having this conversation, right? Like it's confluence of the game's growing popularity pre-COVID, and then I think being in COVID times, there's this need to find new ways to entertain ourselves, to interact with one another, and engage with people. And I think it's kind of created a bit of a perfect storm with a story like this. So, I mean, I don't really expect this has much in the way of actually bringing politics into D&D. I don't think it's going to be a hot topic of debate if Trump and Biden never actually have that third debate now that they've canceled the second one. But I just think it's cool for D&D to see how far D&D and other games like it are really in becoming a part of the mainstream. It makes me think this is one more indicator that this is not sort of a passing fad, and we're actually seeing D&D become something more than it had been through a lot of our lifetime, where even for myself, it was the thing that nerds in the basement played or whatever. It's just something that's more out there and something that you can talk about. Maybe not in every social circle, but certainly more than it used to be. And I think that's cool. I think it's exciting stuff. What do you guys think?
I mean, I just, outside of politics, in terms of like, the people's political ideologies, I just, we just deal with it so much, and it's maddening how much political stuff kind of seeps into our everyday lives. And D&D was a safe place. Like, it was a place to go to without having to worry about U.S. politics. But it's one of those things where maybe it'll be a good thing. I mean, anything that gives D&D more exposure is good. Growing the hobby is good. It's just that, boy, I would hate for D&D sessions to be in any way connected to U.S. politics. That just doesn't seem like a good thing. But it is what it is.
Why these clerics are getting their spells free from the gods? Why don't they just give out healing magics without asking for anything in return?
Yeah.
But then what would be the motivation for people to do better for themselves if they could just get the healing for free? Yeah, I can see why that would be an annoying conversation. I think, people probably already do that because it's funny, but I don't see Donald Trump, hopping onto a D&D stream anytime soon. So I think you're probably safe.
Probably
but
safe.
God, it's 2020, so I really, you never know. I'm knocking on wood right now. Let's hope I don't come to really regret that comment.
Okay, Tom. Well, how about you? How do you feel about this inclusion of U.S. politics into our D&D world?
I mean, compared to like the Satanic Panic, I think it's actually a positive.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, it could be worse, and I think it's actually a positive because it's if people actually are using it and understand it, then I mean, D&D is a very welcoming community. Compared to other fandoms I've been associated with. And I think it's, bringing it in a good light and showing people that it's not a bad thing. And I think it does bring people together, and it helps share ideas and helps share creativity. So if they want to have, their part in it, then I say welcome.
That's a good point, Tom. I really wasn't thinking about it from the aspect of, the positives that the D&D game, sort of the collaborative nature, the inclusive nature of it. You got a good point. I mean, if we're keeping to the spirit of what the hobby tends to be, maybe that's positive.
I agree, Tom. You have softened my heart and changed my mind. So well done on that. Here's the best of luck to Andrew Yang and the rest of the people partaking in that fundraiser. Hope you have a wonderful night of D&D. But we're going to step out quick, but stick around. We will be right back after the break.
As any tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D. And they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
All right, how about another question? This post comes from Reddit user M3Wolf, who asks, one of my players killed a key NPC unprovoked. Thoughts about what the consequences should be? Fairly new DM here, second campaign after Lost Mines of Phandelver. Player is not a problem player. He just often takes actions without thinking through the consequences. The results are often hilarious and add to the enjoyment of the group. This time, though, at least one of the other players was noticeably annoyed in real life at what he did, but failed a perception check to tell that he was lying about what happened when he came out of the other room. I'm not looking for help in player management because I don't think it's a big deal. Instead, I'm looking for some creative ideas on making sure there is a suitable response for killing this NPC that makes it clear that actions have consequences, while still keeping the game fun and punishing the character but not the player. So M3 Wolf goes on to describe what happened, but the short version is player ended up secretly killing an NPC who, though they were with the bad guys, wasn't an actual threat. In fact, the DM was planning on using this NPC to help the players through anything that they missed. They go on to say, however, I'm planning on having this town be a major part of the rest of the story. So I'd rather not encourage them to fight the constable, tamper with evidence, or anything else that might damage their reputation with the townsfolk. Okay, so it sounds like a player was a little quick on the trigger, killed someone the rest of the party was eager to use for information. So Steve, how do you handle things when players end up murdering someone who was important in one way or another?
Gosh, if I only had any experience dealing with a situation like this that I could draw on. No. So I get it. One of the points that the poster M3 Wolf is making at the end is, look, I don't want to make it so that they, blow up their relationship with this town, can't come back. So it clearly can't just be like a case of oh, you got caught red-handed and you either need to scramble to cover yourself, murder more people, or what have you to solve this problem. So it sounds to me like whatever the consequences are, and there should be some consequences, they need to be felt sort of after the fact. So let's think about this. You're going to use this NPC. You're not using them for anything anymore, but you're going to use this NPC to, help them pick up things that they missed, help them with, it sounds like, with information and what have you. They obviously had a beat on the sort of villain of the story. So, make the lack of some of that information hurt, have the players have to stumble through things that may have been easier for them previously, let them sort of stumble through and deal with the headache of not having the information that they might have otherwise had. And perhaps, the best thing to do would be to, have ways for that information to percolate to some extent in other methods, but then make it, glaringly obvious that this was information that this NPC had that the player killed. So maybe it's, they find his journal, and his journal has a bunch of information that gives them, like, I don't know, maybe gives them 50 or 60% of what they needed to know. And it's clear from the journal that this NPC knew the rest of this, just didn't write it down for one of any number of reasons. And wow, it would have been really, really, really awesome if we had this person around to ask, but we don't, because you killed him. And so it avoids, it doesn't create, hopefully doesn't create too much interpersonal drama with the group. I know one player sounds like they were already annoyed, and the question's not really about managing the group, but I think, what that does is probably has the rest of the players groaning a whole lot and like, oh man, you really should not have killed that guy. And it may help that player, because it sounds like more of a player than a character issue about acting too quickly. Now that player is starting to think about, well, maybe I should be a little more sparing. There's this world is obviously populated with characters that could be useful for things other than target practice.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, what do you think, Tom, on this? What would you do?
Again, I really like Steve's idea. And one of the things too, Steve, that to kind of bounce off of that is maybe have like the journal be in code. And it's, they have to take so many extra steps to solve the problem. Maybe they have to find somebody who can break the code, and maybe they have to pay someone, and maybe they have to start spending resources and time, and it becomes not necessarily a slog, because it's even you don't want to basically make the players miserable.
It's still a game.
But make it be many more steps where the entire time they're like, this would have been so much easier if this guy was alive. This would have been so much easier if this guy was alive.
Yeah. And the nice thing about a situation like that, where they're now having to take the long route to get to somewhere, is even further branching of the story, because as they're trying to, for example, figure out how to transcribe this journal, there's a myriad of other things that can happen along the way to make things even more interesting. So definitely don't let this go. Use it. I love those ideas, because you don't know what to expect next, but you know that whatever they have to do is going to create more story hooks, more opportunities for things to go either really well or really poorly. Hopefully really poorly, because that makes it the more interesting story, but there's a lot of opportunity here. So M3 Wolf, hopefully that kind of helps you get some ideas around this. Would love to hear what you end up doing with this character who murdered this person. Would love to hear what actually ended up happening. But moving on, there are thousands of fantastic, weird, and downright horrible stories out there. And some are so ridiculous that you start to question their accuracy. So let's see if you two can figure out the one that doesn't belong in our new segment, Say It Ain't So. Welcome to Say It Ain't So, where we see if our two guests can spot the one that doesn't belong. So here's how it'll work. We'll each read a D&D green text story about player treachery. 2 will be true, 1 will be false. It's your job to figure out which one is the made-up one. Pretty simple, right? So you two ready?
Yep. Let's do this.
All right, let's do it. All right, so Tom, you're going to go first, and just so our listeners are aware, D&D Green Text is basically where Reddit and 4chan mix. So the writing is not standard English. So if it sounds a little chopped up and stuff, that's the reason why. So Tom, we're going to start with your story. Go ahead.
Okay. Too tempting. A pretty inexperienced party on a quest to save a town from bad guys. Walking through dense jungle, came upon a long rope bridge. Party starts to cross. It's rickety. The rogue is the last player in line, sees a sign next to the bridge with a single rope tied at its base. The sign says, "Only pull in case of emergency." The rogue pulls it. The rope is used to collapse the bridge in case of emergency. All of the party falls into a ravine except the rogue. The rogue then asks how much experience he gets for killing the rest of the party.
Excellent. All right. So that is story number 1. Steve, go ahead with story number 2.
The story is entitled Judas Looking. Be me, monk. Be not me, rogue, paladin, and wizard. Arrive in new town. Still new adventurers looking for work. Rogue goes off somewhere. In real life, he's passing notes to the DM. Don't give a shit. Probably just robbing someone. Suddenly me, paladin, and wizard get surrounded by a lot of thugs. We take down a lot but get captured and sold into slavery. Paladin gets holy symbol taken. Wizard gets spellbook taken. I am their last hope. Bust out of my ropes and beat up the slave driver. Bust out friends. Get our shit back. Find out Rogue sold us for just 30 pieces of silver. Only 30 because Judas. Me and Wizard want to kill him. Paladin won't let us. In real life, the DM, me, Paladin, and Wizard all throw him in the snow outside instead.
Nice. All right. So that was Judas Looking. All right. The last story is The Murder of George the Goblin. My players, relatively good aligned party, going in on a small treasure hunt, approach cave only to see a single goblin standing out front who also sees them. Goblin tries to sprint off towards the woods, seeing the scary party of adventurers. Party proceeds to firebolt and shoot the goblin multiple times in the back. Party enters the cave to find a small peaceful goblin clan. Explores rest of the cave, finding a bunch of gold. Goblins thank them on the way out and ask if they've seen George. Party says no and leaves. Party make a pact never to disclose what happened to poor George. R.I.P. George. So, all right. So there's your 3 stories. Tom, we're going to turn to you first. Which one do you think was the fake story? Too Tempting, Judas Looking, or The Murder of George the Goblin?
This is a hard one. Normally there's one that kind of really stands out. I'm actually going to say the Too Tempting.
Too Tempting?
Because yeah, Too Tempting, because that's just is way too easy of a pull this in case of emergency.
It's like that big red button kind of scenario.
Yeah,
huh?
and I mean, granted, the people do that, but I feel like most of your players would be like, well,
would be like, no.
yeah. Like they would have been like, well, it's attached to the bridge. They would have logicked it out a little bit without just pulling it.
All right.
But yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Steve, which one do you think was the fake one? Too Tempting, Judas Looking, or The Murder of George the Goblin?
Okay, so let's start backwards. The Murder of George the Goblin is absolutely got to be a true story. I feel like that sounds exactly like the sort of shenanigans that a party like ours could run into. So that one feels, and I'm going to be sad if I'm wrong, but it feels very real to me. Judas Looking, at first I wanted to say this is the fake story. I mean, he's going to sell them out just for 30 pieces of silver. Are they, this is a very Judeo-Christian prank to pull on your friends. But at the same time, that's what gives it the ring of a little bit of truth. It's very specific. Okay. You could have done all of this without really making it about Judas and 30 pieces of silver, and it still would have fit the theme. So that leads me to believe it could be true. Ergo, too good to be true is too good to be true.
Okay. So you're saying which one? Too Tempting is the fake one?
Oh, right. Yeah, it's not too good. It's Too Tempting. So Too Tempting is too good to be true.
Too good to
I say it isn't so.
Well, I have news for both of you. You're both Correct. It was too tempting. That was the fake one. So well done on spotting the fake. The other two are 100% true stories and just amazing stories that I love it.
Side note, does it sound to you guys at all like D&D green text and this sort of style of talking is really just kind of like that episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where Picard and the pig-faced guy are talking about, arms wide open on the plains of Tanagra? You know what I'm talking about? You remember that episode where like the universal translator didn't work? Walls high. You guys know what I'm talking about?
I do not. Tom, do you?
I have not seen that one.
No, I'm not a Trekkie, so I don't know. I'm sorry.
I've seen a lot of Next Generation, but I have not seen that one.
That's definitely one you need to find, Tom. It's actually a fantastic episode. It's just like so much of it is just like Picard and this alien stuck on this planet and like figuring out how to communicate with each other. It's like really a great Star Trek story. Also, Adam, totally on brand for yet just another thing that is pretty well beloved. You're just like, yeah, I don't really like that thing.
Well,
like, what do you like?
And I was just about to say, I apologize for interrupting you because it sounded like you were just about to rail me about my taste in TV, movies, etc. Every single time.
I wouldn't miss a good opportunity.
But I am willing to bet there's plenty of people who are just like me who do not watch Star Trek, and I'm perfectly fine with it. There's nothing wrong with it. If you want to watch Star Trek, hey, you do your thing. But it just wasn't.
It's not really about the Star Trek, though. It's about the every pop culture reference you have. I mean, I'm just waiting for the time where it's like, yeah, I really like that thing. There hasn't been that yet. Sure. A lot of people don't like Star Trek. That's fine. You don't have to like Star Trek.
I am saving that for our season finale to finally have a pop reference that I understand and can relate to. So stay tuned for that. We'll
start planning that one ahead of time so it doesn't sound staged.
Well ahead of time. All right. Hey, great job, guys. Let's get into the last post of the week. This comes from Reddit user From Another World, who asks, how should I handle this? Big consequences. Hey guys, newish DM here. My players have just killed the king of a city that lies on the back of a giant dragon turtle and are currently escaping the city. First off, very cool. Love that. The turtle and the king had a friendship/symbiotic relationship. The king would feed the turtle disabled or injured citizens, and the turtle would provide a home for the city itself. They were about to negotiate with the king to find an alternate food source until they learned the king fed their friend, an NPC, to the turtle and decided to fight the king. Now that the king is dead, the turtle has no need for the city and is currently destroying it. I want my players to know that their actions have consequences, but an entire city of innocent people being killed because they killed an evil king is a little much. Or is it? I want to give them a chance to stop the turtle from destroying the city. How would I go about doing that? They're level 3, by the way, so fighting is a no-go. Plus, the turtle is low-key a literal god. Maybe they'll try to evacuate the city, but I don't know. Should I let the turtle destroy the whole city, killing thousands of innocent people, showing that the player's actions have consequences? It's just that's a lot, and I don't want them to feel like shit, you know what I mean? After all, they're still supposed to be the good guys. Any advice would help. Oh, ouch. Okay, Tom, tough spot to be in. You can tell the DM is feeling uneasy about this. How do you think you would handle this one?
Well, decisions are not always black and white. They're gray, and they probably should feel a little bit shitty because things are unfortunate, but to be fair, he was literally feeding people. He was sacrificing people to the city. Like, he was not a good guy. They did a good thing in one context, but it ends up having negative consequences in another. I feel like there's some depth here that he's trying to push aside just because he doesn't want to have it feel like that, they didn't do a good thing, and he wants it to be black and white. And I feel like solutions now, they could if the turtle is clearly able to negotiate, it's an intelligent creature, it's able to negotiate with the king for, here's this city. They could try to negotiating with the turtle and say, hey, if you want to end this pact, can we come up with some sort of deal to give us time to evacuate the city? And have them do, they can't fight it, so why not try to negotiate with it? Try to even delay it while they're trying to get people away from the city. I don't think that Again, maybe they could find an option where they find a new food source and continue this tentative truce. But I feel like this is like trying to save the city separate of the people, but trying to save the city and keep the status quo is a bad idea, because as they've seen, this is a very tentative truce and it's not going to last.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest you try to go with a option of negotiate or distract and try to save as many people as possible. But inevitably, if it fails, then they tried their best. And I don't think that should be something that if they feel shitty about it afterwards, that's they can move on from that. They can grow from that. But at least they've tried.
I think in this scenario, and I love the idea of, it's not black and white. There are always going to be unintended consequences. And I love the unintended consequences that are coming from this. There's so much rich story, and not just about what do we do about the people right now that are in the story, but now you have a dragon turtle that is basically on the loose. And all the things that could happen from that storyline are going to be great. There's a lot that can be done. Maybe they're level 3 right now and can't do anything in terms of fighting, but they're going to advance in level. They'll eventually be strong enough to, whether it's fight or tame or persuade or whatever. There's a lot that you're going to be able to do down the road. This can be an ongoing storyline, and I understand that might feel kind of bad to have all these innocent people die, but man, what a powerful story element that you have right here. Steve, what do you think? Like, do you think the DM's in a good position here?
Maybe it's the Avernian mindset that I have when I'm plotting D&D, but was this king really all that evil? Why is the city built on the back of a sea turtle dragon monstrosity in the first place? Sure, I guess some people were fed to the dragon turtle, and not, it doesn't sound like they were necessarily willing or already perished. So there's some sacrifices, but what society doesn't have sacrifices?
Oh, jeez.
I mean, really. It's built. I hate to say it. Yeah, I hate to say it, but like even our like real life moderns, let's not get too in the real world here, but our real world society. I mean, there's just an acceptable amount of loss. It just happens. So now you guys went, well, it was fine until it was the NPC that we liked, which is, that's a morally difficult stance to take. We're fine until we found out it was the guy we liked, and then they went and killed the king, and now look at all the consequences. So maybe, instead of having to evacuate the city, because where are you going to evacuate these people to? They're just going to go and take someone else's land and make that theirs because, their city is not feasible for them anymore. Maybe the need is to negotiate with the dragon turtle and to find a new king, someone who can respect and honor the deal. The dragon just wants to eat. I don't think it really is all that worried about, I need to get the city off me. It was running with the city, no problem. It's just angry. It's hungry. It's mad. You killed the king. It liked the king. So yeah, at least had one friend in the world. So maybe the punishment for the PCs, the consequences is that they need to realize that it's not an entirely just world, or that a just world is not one that is entirely good. And so they have to partake in finding an appropriate replacement for the king, in ensuring some measure of this ongoing feeding program continues. Maybe they can adjust it slightly, make it more humane. Maybe it's a random lottery so that, if you want to live in this town, we all share in the same amount of risk. Who knows? They have to think about it and be clever about it. But maybe they just need to fix the relationship. The city doesn't become destroyed, but the players walk away with a deep wound into their preconceived notions of the world. And you've now broadened their horizons and set ripe pieces up to activate the story down the line.
I actually really like that. I really like the idea of challenging the preconception here. You killed our friend, so now we're going to kill you. And that, even though the king might have been bad-ish, was your action really any better? And really kind of set them back on their heels a bit and say, hey, yeah, you're the good guys, but that doesn't mean that everything you do is good. Just because it's right in this situation doesn't mean it's right for everyone. And the idea that, hey, maybe this king did some bad stuff, but maybe it was necessary bad stuff. Maybe you don't know the history of this, and yes, you're aware of the symbiotic relationship, but how did that symbiotic relationship start? Did the king actually save lives by doing this? And what kind of moral implications does that have, that he's feeding injured and dying people to this dragon turtle before they actually die? That's some harsh morality lessons that are coming out of that. So I really like that. I understand the unease, but I think you're in a really good spot from Another World. I really think that this is a rich storyline, a rich vein that you can mine here for many, many sessions to come. So if I were a DM in this situation, I think I'd be pretty happy about where I'm at right now.
Look at my chops.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of juicy stuff.
Again, read up on social Darwinism and try to apply that. And and I volunteer as tribute and go with that.
There you go. All right. Hunger Games reference. I got one. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, hey, hopefully that helped from Another World. For us, that is going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@PotomacRPG.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/PotomacRPG. Some good stuff on there. If
wearing my shirt right now. It's fantastic.
Yeah, if you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/Potomac RPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Tom and Steve. Had a great time. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. For the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Steve.
Until next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
Never stop murdering. No, guys, definitely do not murder. I can't stress that enough.
No, murder.
NRP.
Don't worry, I've given you guys everything you need to know to what to do.
Oh no! I know.
You guys haven't murdered Candlekeep or anything, so you haven't pulled whatever we're calling ourselves, the fucking Dread Pirates,
Dread 7.
And Andreas,
Sarad's Dread Crew, or whatever the hell.